Welcome back to Luminary Leaders Live. My name is Shelley Harrison and I'm your host. And today I have an amazing guest and he's coming to us from Portland, Oregon, although he's out of San Diego. So we get a sneak peek at our guest today. You can see him next to me here. But I want to thank you for joining us because today we're going to talk about storytelling. And my guest is a 3-time TEDx speaker. He's a writer, he's an author, and he advocates for so many different wonderful causes. We're not going to get into too many of those today because we want to know more about LeRon. I almost said it, but we want to know more about LeRon and his background. And I want to welcome LeRon Barton to Luminary Leaders Live. Welcome, LeRon.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate it. Love the intro. And yeah, storytelling's is like my number one passion in life. It's something that I've been doing since I was a wee little lad, and I'm just
Storytelling.
I'm really all about telling stories, but even more so, Shelley, I'm all about listening to stories because that's what really counts.
No, absolutely. And you know what I loved about, because before, I mean, we had a Zoom meeting, we met, we talked, and we've been staying in contact. And I watched your two of your TEDx talks, and I'm just impressed by the way that you share because it's very authentic. I really want our audience though to know about you and what really ignites you with the work that you do. And I know that you've got so many different things that you do: writing, you're an author, you're a speaker, and you also have other things. So share with us, share with our audience, LeRon.
Right. Well, for me, my favorite thing to do in the world to do is write. It's the best thing that I know to do. I mean, it's just something that just comes at ease. And so, writing, like everything flows from the writing, whether it be, speaking, whether it be like, writing novels, writing books, speeches, everything starts, the genesis of it is writing. And so for me, it's all about talking about my experience, but also encouraging others to talk about their experience. I've always said that, you know, the dominant narrative is so linear. And to quote
Mhm.
my favorite podcaster, the late great I'm forgetting his I'm forgetting his name I'm sorry, Combat Jack.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Combat Jack. He would always say the universe flows in Technicolor. And so
Ooh.
when we have a chance for everyone to grab a platform to talk about who they are, what they've been through, what their story is, we not only get a chance to see the entire world, but also we learn. Because the thing about stories, Shelly, is that stories for me, they hit harder than data, right? Because I mean, anyone can read stats, they can read numbers, but a story allows you to sort of step foot into that person's experience. It allows you to really take in what that person has went through, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And I love it.
Yeah, it's people that are comfortable sharing their stories, because let's face it, stories come in all shapes and sizes, from things that happened in their childhood, things that happened as they're an adult, or stories that they share about experiences that they've had. I do have one client. I want to give him a shout out because he
Sure.
talks about Dr. Fred Moss talks about finding your true authentic voice. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, what we're talking about, LeRon, is being able to really share freely. And I love that you're a great listener too, because that's one thing that I've noticed,
Absolutely.
through our conversations, that you are a great listener. And the work that you're doing, let's talk about that as far as the storytelling
Sure.
and where you see that kind of the opportunities.
So just to kind of backtrack regarding listening,
Yeah.
a really good friend of mine, John Weber, he once said many people, listen to respond, but they don't listen to take things in. And so
Mhm.
when you sort of drop your defenses, listening, you have to be vulnerable, right? Because not only are you being vulnerable, but the person that's telling you the story is being vulnerable. And so when you listen with the intention of taking everything in, like learning about the person, just you know fully receiving their their response, you get a chance to just soak up so much. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
with storytelling, that kind of goes along like with my first two books, Straight Dope or 360-degree Look into American Drug Culture, and All We Really Need Is Love, stories of dating, relationships, heartbreak, and marriage. These
Wow.
were inspired by a writer by the name of the late great Studs Terkel. And Studs,
Mm.
if you have not heard of Studs, I think you need to pause this interview, go to like your library or Amazon and buy a Studs book. And so Studs wasn't so much of a writer as that he was an editor, because he would just listen to people tell these
Mm.
stories, and I just thought that it was so incredible. And so
Yeah.
my storytelling has been affected by listening to people talk, not only listening to what they say but how they say it, the the nuances, the intricacies, whether it be like the slang, the
Yeah.
the accent, things that are very, I guess, localized, or just like culturally tied into who that person is. That's the beautiful thing, because Shelly,
Mm.
one thing that I realize is that, as a writer, one of my responsibilities is to be authentic, as your client talks about. And one of the
Mhm.
ways to be authentic is to step back and to know that, okay, I am not of this certain group. I am not of this certain culture. So I cannot tell
Yeah.
this story accurately. So what I can do is I can help and empower someone from that group to tell their story, or partner with them to be able to tell it more effectively. Because at the
Right.
end of the day, authenticity truly matters.
And it does. And, people matter. And I think that, there are a lot of, stories that can be told in many different forms, either on a platform speaking, or on a TEDx stage, or, even in a book or a magazine. I mean, wouldn't you agree though that, telling a story does take, you know, along with the authenticity, I think it takes the
Right.
courage to tell the story.
100%. Because one thing you have to understand that is like when you tell your story, you're being somehow, it's you are being vulnerable, right? So you're being naked. Hence,
Yes.
it's like, if, and to my poets out there, I'm pretty sure that they may understand what I'm talking about. It's like after you recite that poem, that last line, and you pause and you let everyone take it in. That's what it is to tell your story. And some people may not connect with it. Some people
That's right.
may be offended by it, but you have to understand that it's your story. And for me, going back to authenticity, Shelley, when you write something, and when you write it from the heart, when you give a speech from the heart, when you make a movie or a film or write a play from the heart, you have to go into it knowing that not everyone's going to understand it, and that's
Right,
okay.
or agree with it, or they'll
Yeah,
have a reaction or an
exactly.
experience.
Not
Yeah.
everyone's gonna not everyone's going to resonate with that, and that's okay. I was giving a talk last week about storytelling, and I told someone, I said, not everyone's universally loved. Like, no one is universally loved
Yeah.
here. There's always going to be someone that's going to have a problem with what you say. So one of the things that I really advise, and I'm so adamant on, is don't write or create something for the aim to please people, right? So many of us are worried about mass consumption. They're worried about universal acclaim. But
Mhm.
when you do that, when you purposely do something, like I say, for the pop charts, then you
Yeah.
lose a sense of authenticity, and you start to lose your voice, and
Yeah,
that's
and
what you don't want to
credibility.
do.
And yes,
Credibility,
and I
absolutely.
think credibility has a lot to do with it too, because again, I think when we're doing something live like this, like I just had my camera go out, so
Oh
I
yeah.
apologize because you got my
Oh,
picture, and but we made it work. And
wonderful
you
picture. No.
you were steady. You did great. And that doesn't happen very often. So shame on me, right? But no, I think that the people that don't use, where they're doing it in a way that is it's not, it's more intentional, like they have an
Right.
agenda. They have
Right.
something that they want to accomplish, but yet they're doing it because, like you said, they want the notoriety, they want the
Right.
the pop charts,
Right.
and that's where I think, shows like this, where we talk about speakers, we talk about TEDx speakers, we talk with people all over the world. And what really struck me about you, and again, I know that you talk on some amazing topics that
Thank you.
I'm very compassionate about.
Thank you.
And I want you to share some of those topics that you do talk about,
Sure.
LeRon.
So the my most famous talk, my first TEDx talk, it was called "How I Overcame the Fear of My Stutter." And for those who have listened to me for this past 10, 11 minutes, know that I have a stutter. It's something that I've had since the age of 5 or 6. It's something that I will have forever. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't define me. It's just a part of who I am. So I talk about how you should not let your handicap or just something that you have define or stop you from doing what you want to do. Shelly, like my stutter for the first part of my life, it really, or I'm sorry, the first couple, say 30 years of my life, right? It
Yeah.
really, it hindered me from pursuing different opportunities. And one of those opportunities was speaking. I thought, who is this kid like who has a stutter? Who am I to get on a stage or get on a microphone and to talk? But I realized that everybody's got something, and so are you going to let that stop you from speaking, from telling your story,
That's right.
or you just going to get up there and just say, hey, you know what? My camera goes out. So what? I'm still going to keep
Yeah.
going, right? I mean,
That's right.
it's like years ago, I saw Derek Huff. I believe that's the gentleman's name. He's a dancer. I
Oh,
believe
yeah.
he's
Yeah.
a
And he
dancer
has
with
a
guitar.
sister who's a
Yeah,
dancer.
right.
Yeah.
And so he had talked about how to sort of how to deal with the mistakes. And he's like, if you sort of take a misstep, you sort of fall into it, and you get up and you keep moving. And that's what it is about speaking. I'm pretty sure everyone who is a speaker, who has given interviews, we've 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 missed something, we've misspoke, we've maybe
Oh,
we've maybe
easily.
forgot something.
People have fallen off the stage, and imagine having to come back after something like that, and people make it work,
Oh,
you
oh my
know?
god, like you like that, that's because that person, they're like, look, I seen a video where, like, I think like Beyonce failed, she got up and she kept dancing. so
Yeah. And
so that's what
she's
you have to do.
one of the most famous people in the world.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
she
You
keeps
just,
she keeps going. so
yeah, she does. She
so in
absolutely
in
does.
addition to my stutter, I talk about race from the perspective of a black male. I talk about diversity in tech. And I also talk about again, the power of sharing your story, because you know it 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 when you don't share your story, Shelly, what that
Mhm.
does is that deprives someone of not only knowing you, but it also could deprive someone from learning and being inspired by you, because we all have something that is going to lift someone up. Like, you
Oh,
know,
absolutely.
it's
And
we should not play small with that.
oh, I
I'm sorry.
know.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and you just reminded me, because this is something, and I won't say who it is, but I had a speaker that we worked with, and she talked about, just violence, and just different things, that were going on in someone in her family, in their life. And I
Right.
was at an event, and we had a woman who was in the bathroom and was in a domestic violence situation in her home. And the person that I was representing was on stage talking about it. And the people from the event, they came over and they said, hey, Shelley, we've got a woman in the bathroom. She's crying.
Wow.
She's in a situation of domestic violence. And this speaker spoke to her heart, and that's what kind of made it come out. And as soon as my client was done, I heard about it. I briefed him on what was going on, and she went straight to the ladies' room and embraced this woman, gave her some
That's
information.
what
And
it's about.
yeah, and it was one
That's what it's
person.
about.
That was one person, and that woman, it touched her so deeply that that my client was compassionate enough to go and really help her and give her some guidance.
That's
But
incredible. I
that's what it
mean,
can do. Yeah,
exactly,
that's what it
exactly.
can
So,
do,
so
Ron.
just imagine, like, you're feeling like, oh, no one's gonna care, no one's gonna listen. Look, listen, I have gotten so many emails, Shelly, so many
I
messages,
bet.
people saying,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, what you did just off that one talk," saying, "Oh my God, you've inspired me." Like I've talked to so many people, and so one
Yeah.
thing that I want to tell everybody out there is, like, don't think that no one wants to hear your story. Listen, there's almost this maybe like 100,000 podcasts out there, right? I mean, and
Maybe even more.
right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like hundreds of thousands of podcasts
Yeah.
out out there, and so these people, they have the confidence to say, "Oh, yo, you know what? Someone's gonna care about what I have to say." So
Yeah.
again, by you depriving us of what you've been through, your experience, you're potentially not connecting to someone that may need to hear what you have to say,
That's
because
right.
that's the thing about storytelling. Like, it could touch, it could lift up somebody. It could, some people may say, Shelly, I really need to hear that today because I'm going through that same thing.
Yeah.
I always say that I am not an individual, but I'm a part of a collective. And because I'm a part of a collective, I have a responsibility to help others through my work. And storytelling is the thing that I do to help folks.
Yeah. And like I told you, LeRon, I just love the work that you're doing, and
Thank
how you're really getting out there and advocating in so many different platforms, TEDx, radio shows, podcast shows. And the focus today, we're focused on, your TEDx talks, your speaking, storytelling. And what would you say to someone that maybe is just getting started and they're not at the point that you are, but they have a compelling story that they want to share? How should they get started?
So, I'm 2 years in, right? And so, well, actually, I'm sorry, 4 years in, because I did my TEDx in 2018, but I started
Yeah.
doing this professionally in 2020. What I would say to that
During a
person is,
pandemic, by the way.
during a
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I would say to that person, for one, don't stop, keep doing what you're doing. The second point, this is so important.
Yeah.
We all have we all live different lives, so you know do you remember the show Project Greenlight?
Oh my
It was
gosh.
it was a show, I believe it came on like HBO, or was it IFC? Anyway,
I don't
it,
recall.
it was a show produced by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And
Oh,
what it was is, like, we're gonna have these two teams of people create a movie. We're gonna give y'all the same script, and what do you know? Each film was different. So we may be talking about the same topic, but I guarantee you our stories are going to be different. So don't worry about talking about something that someone else has already talked about, because your experience is going to be different. And finally, be yourself. You know, a lot of speakers, and Shelly, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. A lot of
yeah.
speakers feel like that they have to be super polished, that they have to be robotic, stiff. Oh, I'm going to use the right, like, lingo. I'm going to use, like, the right
Yeah.
rhetoric. I'm
Politically correct. And
exact politically correct. I
yeah.
have to dress a certain way. Listen, just be yourself, because you're the best at being you. And if you try to be somebody else, then it's going to be corny, and it's going to be like, oh, this person's not really being themselves. They're trying to appease someone. So
Thank you for
yeah,
saying that, because that is so true. And they say, if you have a speech or a talk, practice, 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 practice.
100%.
True. That the content, because it's and there's a client that I had that I was kind of sharing in the very beginning. Her talk was the same exact story that happened once, right? But every time she told it, new details would come out. She
Wow,
would say in a
that's
different way,
awesome.
but always it's the same story. It would never change. But the way that she told it, that's why it was so engaging, because it wasn't the same talk all the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But
So she just kept just so she kind of just, like, told it in a different way,
in a different way, or
or just kind of added stuff.
or started in different places of the story. She would go back and talk about, well, this is what happened the day of,
That
or this
sounds
is
so
what
interesting.
happened. Yeah. So it was, I mean, it's very interesting the way, because that story was very hard for her to tell, and it's a very traumatic story. So she didn't want to regurgitate it each and every
Right.
time the same way.
You know what, like that
Yeah.
that leads me to something else. So
Oh, let's hear it.
I remember it was right after I did my first TEDx, and I was watching it was the Toastmasters World Series Championship, something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing this young lady. She told a story about her life, and it was incredible. It it encompassed everything that a great story had. It had a lot of like twists and turns, and success, failure. I mean, just like it was just peaks and valleys, right? And so, to speakers out there, do not be afraid to talk about your failures. Listen, I you know in my first TEDx, I talked about how I gave a speech in front of Glide Church in San Francisco, California, and I stuttered through that whole speech, and it was terrible, and it
Oh,
made me not want to. It made me not want to talk.
yeah.
I've I've given talks where people have stopped me in the middle of talk. Okay, okay. But when are we going to talk about the topic? And I've had people, battle me. I mean, but these aren't. I mean, I've had some failures, lots of success, but you have to be
Yeah.
vulnerable because,
You really
you know,
do.
uh,
And be
right,
willing to make mistakes and just kind of brush over them. And it's no different, LeRon, like for me on doing this show. I have certain things that I have to make sure are accomplished and done before the show, but I want to be authentically myself. And
being
like
authentic.
today, the camera went out, so that I have to
For
be
what?
willing to accept. Hey,
You know, like things happen, right? And
yeah,
people gravitate to authenticity. People gravitate to, someone coming from the bottom. Started from the bottom. Now we're here. I mean, you know, when I think about all the great stories, there's two historical figures that I absolutely love the most, Malcolm X and Saint Augustine of Hippo, and these are
um,
men that just started from just the bottom and rose
mm,
up. And you see their failures, their regrets, things like that they should have done better, but they were vulnerable, and as you said, Shelly, they were authentic, and they moved in a level of authenticity. Because who wants to hear from somebody that's super perfect and polished? I would rather listen
yeah.
to that. I would rather listen to that speaker that's like, oops, I forgot something.
Yeah, it's
Let's
more
do it again. Like,
intriguing. It's more intriguing that way because you want to hear the rest of the story.
yeah,
And it's like, oh my gosh, what are they going to talk about next? And when they're really polished and they practiced, and it's a story that is really more self-serving. It's not as interesting.
I like
And you can
that.
tell right away.
I, I like that. It's almost like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what they do on a regular basis. But like,
Yeah.
this is like a paint by numbers thing. But they're not really trying to. But they're not
Yeah.
really trying to connect with the audience. Like, you know,
Yeah.
again, like the best speeches that I've ever heard, Shelley, and the best stories that I've ever heard come from a place of humility, authenticity,
Yes.
vulnerability. Those three things, and that'll just, if you combine those three things into one story, you'll just fall in love with it, and I
Yeah.
guarantee you'll think about it from days on end.
I completely agree with that, LeRon. And you've been awesome today. And I
Thank you
know
so
that
much.
we're gonna have to have a part two because I know
Okay,
you're
let's do
in
it.
Portland, Oregon right now. Question: have you heard of
Yes,
Voodoo Donuts?
yes. So, all right.
Have you been there?
So, come on now. Like, I've been a
You can't
voodoo
go to Portland without
at,
going there.
at least 5 times. So, like, it's sugar overload, but
Oh yeah.
but LeRon loves sugar, so
Yeah, well, in moderation, right? You can have half in the morning, half in the evening, right? You know,
that's
because they
that.
have some really cool donuts
Oh
there, you
my,
have to admit.
oh man, like DL Dirty Bastard. They have a Captain Crunch. It's just, I
Oh, they
mean,
have so many cool names, we went in there with my kids when we went to Oregon, and some of the names, I'm like, okay, you can have that one, but don't say the name,
right?
because
Yeah,
they were
no,
little.
it's a lot. Plus, I mean, like I gotta imagine like little kids eating all that sugar. Mom's gonna be like, oh my god,
Oh, I
when are
know.
you
They're
going
going
to
to be
go to
bouncing off the
bed?
walls. Yeah, but it is a cool place. It
Very
is
cool,
definitely a cool place
very cool place.
if you're in Portland, Oregon. But
Portland, Oregon, as well as there's also one in Houston. So,
oh, in
you know,
Houston.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. So I mean, there's and they're building a Voodoo Donut in the Denver airport. So you definitely got to get
Oh,
down there.
well, we love it here in California, right? Maybe San
Yes.
Diego or LA or
Oh my
somewhere
God.
to get
Oh
it
my God.
started.
You know what, Shelly? So a friend of mine told me that. So there's a great Chicago sort of franchise called Portillo's, where they do hot dogs, they do Italian beef, all hamburgers, and there's one in the OC. So
I've Portolos, right?
yes,
I've heard of
yeah,
it. I've not been there, but I've heard of it, and they have lines constantly.
yes,
Constantly.
it's a wonderful place. So
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of great eateries
listen,
everywhere.
I will travel for food. So I'm just saying, it's like food is life. Come on, for real.
Oh my gosh. So as we close, what is next for you, LeRon?
Yeah, that's a really cool question. So, within a couple weeks, actually next week, I'm going to be going down to TEDx Wilson Park. I'm a speaker coach,
Awesome.
so I'm going to
Yeah.
be watching the person that I've been working with on their speech. It's going to be
Wow.
allowing me to step in front of the camera to sort of step behind it. I'm also working on a couple articles, and I'm thinking about getting back in the ring, Shelly. I'm thinking about giving another TEDx. I don't know, like
Oh,
I got an idea. So it's all about applying, but hopefully, God willing, that will come to fruition. So
I'm sure that it will. Now that you put it out there in the universe,
it's
it's
out
got to
there.
happen. It's
Word,
got to
word.
happen. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, LeRon, having
This
you
has been great.
today and, just having this conversation. And I know that our conversation is not over.
No,
We've
no.
got a lot more stuff to cover. But how can people reach out to you and make sure, because we're on the podcast too, where
Yes.
they won't see your website. So tell us your website.
Yes. So my website is, and it's drum roll, it's a big surprise, www.leronbarton.com. That's LeronBarton.com.
Perfect.
There,
And
there you can find links to my writing, order my books, watch my talks, and just all things LeRon Barton. So
awesome. And we will make sure that it's in the show
thank you,
notes too.
thank you so
And
much.
yes, thank you, LeRon. It's been wonderful. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in today. Today we have LeRon Barton out of Portland, Oregon. He's from San Diego or lives in San Diego, but from Kansas City, right? Kansas City,
Absolutely,
Missouri.
absolutely. Southside,
Yeah.
yes. Can't see Missouri, home of the best barbecue in the entire world.
Yeah, and the Show Me State.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
yeah, show me that barbecue. Oh my
Word
gosh.
up.
Oh boy. So again, thank you to our audience for being with us. Subscribe to Luminary Leaders Live. We love subscribers and to catch episodes just like this with great people like we had with LeRon today on Luminary Leaders Live. Again, I'm your host, Shelly Harrison, and I'm the CEO and founder of Luminary Leaders. So you can find us at luminaryspeakers.com. So with that, I wish everybody a great week, month, and pumpkin spice is out now with Starbucks. So go get yourself a pumpkin spice. Thank you.
All right, you guys.